something go right over the top of us that looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast. We just had something go right over the top of us that looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast.
Now we come on to the electronics, and this is something which we're in danger of the show becoming a nerd's paradise.
Indeed.
But this is something that Andrew and I are both very well qualified to look at, as you will see in a moment. This comes from a blog which you can look up online called the Astro Engineers blog from 2010. This was posted. I was only made aware of it maybe 8-9 months ago, something like that. It's a 14,000 word expose of someone's experiences while working for the Jet Propulsion Labs on the Curiosity system. In particular, these two guys were software engineers, or appeared to be software engineers, certainly had good knowledge of the software of the Curiosity rover. As I say, 14,000 expose of their explanation of what happened when one of them started to investigate a problem on the Curiosity rover. Now, do you want to explain it?
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting. I wasn't aware of this until we discussed this interview about a week ago or so, or something, and probably less than that. So I read through this thing, and I looked at it initially, and I thought, oh no, it's too long to read now. But but as I began to read it, as you said, being a bit of a nerd myself, I was kind of drawn into it, and the discussion struck me as very authentic, and I couldn't really. It mentions things like aspects of Unix and Linux, which are operating systems, which seemed to me totally legitimate, and the way that they described the fault finding that they were essentially doing was also, it just seemed exactly the way I would have done it. And the guy that was doing this initial fault finding was clearly very competent and very knowledgeable and highly skilled in what he was doing, and the way his friend describes their working relationship will also, I mean, I've experienced working relationships like just as he described in the work that I've previously done. And it's almost like when you read this blog, it's almost like you're working with them because it's very well written. And I couldn't find any, I did sort of stop halfway through and I'm thinking, well, is somebody just spinning a good yarn here? But it really, to me, by the time I got to the end, I did think it's probably a genuine account.
Right.
That what they'd written to me did seem to be genuine.
Right.
And the scenario is that they were basically looking into a scenario where one of the rovers had failed to respond to a command which had been given to it. And this is flagged up automatically as something that needs to be investigated by, the techie guys. So they did what's called a memory dump, where they actually saved out a portion of the rover's memory, the RAM, to look at what software was actually running at the time this fault occurred. And they talk about reverse engineering the assembler language back into C code.
Decompiling.
Exactly, yes. So that they could then work out what had caused this fault or what software was running when this fault
I think
happened.
he was able to then work out the C code.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
So he could then actually
go back to the source code that they had and work out which module and which application, which subroutines were actually running.
Yeah.
And during the course of that analysis, they found some code which had been loaded into the RAM, which they didn't recognize. And looking at the memory mapping within this code, it appeared to be talking to another module.
Okay, so let's just simplify what he's talking about.
This is right down your street, isn't it?
He's talking about the system's been hacked. That's the simple way of describing what he's talking about. He's talking about, so they took everything that was in the memory of the system and they recompiled it. In other words, they put it back into the instructions they would have written to get it to do what it does. And they found stuff in there that they didn't put in there,
right.
Which means it's been hacked.
Right.
Now, you've got to bear in mind, this thing hasn't been hacked by the Chinese or the Russians or anything like that. This thing is a closed system. You know, the equipment you'd have to speak to this system, although the security of it is questionable, he's talking about it speaking to another module. And that means another card that someone has plugged into the rover. So whoever did this hacked the system
post-launch,
has physical access to the rover. Whoever hacked the system has physical access to the rover. Wow. So unless the Chinese flew there, landed, went up to the rover in a spacesuit, plugged in an extra card without being seen on any of the cameras in the 2 weeks whilst behind the sun, rewrote the code and then flew home again, this is something that someone in NASA is aware of.
Or there are people on Mars already.
Or, well, that's not impossible, is it? That literally there's people on Mars already and it was getting too close to their base and they went over to it and plugged a card in so they had control. But I think in that case...
Well, that explains the fingerprints. That explains the certain clean elements of when you see those images of the solar panels, with certain parts have dust, certain parts look clean, like if they've just been like the bolts of the indentation of the bolts aren't full of dirt. Those sort of things shout to me that it's been tampered with and worked on.
But to me, if it was really near a secret settlement of
sensitive side,
American people or whoever on Mars, I don't think they would allow it to survive, personally. I think they would... Because you can't move it, because people on Earth are going to know you moved it. You can't wait for it... I mean, to me, the idea that you'd constantly monitor it to make sure it didn't give you away seems like a very long-winded way, when all they've got to do is shoot it.
True, but if we're talking hypothetically of a settlement being there, they're not going to be a settlement with technology that we use. There'll be a settlement with technology we have no idea about, because to get there and have a settlement without us knowing, without us seeing a physical launch, without us seeing anything like that, means it breeds credence to the secret space program, where you have flotillas of ships that can travel very fast. You can have technology that we're getting really out there now, but that's one explanation. I'm just trying to push something out there.
Okay, but we're about to get... Having seen the paper, we're about to get another piece of information which is going to render that impossible.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so, but the reason I wanted to interrupt it there is just to explain that he's talking about the code of the system has been hacked and it's accessing a card at an address. Because when you have a system like that, you have sort of, just like slots in your computer where you put your graphics card and stuff like that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's a physical hardware.
It's referencing a hardware slot that is supposed to be empty.
Right.
And it's got something in it. So that's where these guys are at writing this thing right now.
Right.
They're completely confused by what the heck is going on. And let's see the conclusions they reach.
And these modules have a particular I/O address, input-output address in the system. And so when they looked into that and they had all the specs for the rovers and how they worked and how the systems worked, and you've put some more of that in the hypothesis, haven't you, about the VX works and the VME bus, which is what you worked with in your work. And so they then, after a period of, I think, a couple of weeks at looking at this in their spare time, sort of under the table, so to speak, they worked out that what appeared to be happening was this code was talking to another radio module. And further to that, they were able to retrieve some of the data which this radio module had been working with. And it turned out that they were able to actually save out some of this data. And it turned out to be thumbnail images, which are these little versions of images that you see on a digital camera. When you have taken a load of pictures and you want to look at the preview, you see these tiny little images. They're called thumbnails. And this is what they were able to retrieve. And then after several weeks, maybe a couple of months, they actually went to the length of taking the thumbnails that they'd managed to retrieve from the analysis that they'd done and comparing those with other thumbnails which are already on their image database.
Well, they did a scan of the whole JPL
Yeah.
network. One
Yeah.
of them had access to other departments within JPL because he was an administrator of
That's right.
some kind. And they generated their own thumbnail, and then which had specific characteristics within it, because it was generated using this specific function. And then they did a scan comparing it, and they found some thumbnails would have been generated with the same code.
That's right. That's
So
right.
someone in the JPL company had access to this secret code that was running in the Curiosity rover. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it was the Opportunity or the Spirit, wasn't it?
Oh, right, sorry, yes,
'Cause it
yes,
was the early
yes.
images,
It
that's
wasn't
what you
it
said,
wasn't
yeah.
Curiosity.
It wasn't
Yes,
Curiosity, it was
yes.
either the Spirit or the Opportunity. But
Correct.
yeah. So they done that, and then they actually found where these, shall we say, secret or rogue thumbnail images, whatever you want to call them, these clandestinely retrieved thumbnail images, they found where they were stored. And they were stored, what was the name of that group that they were stored?
I've got it in here.
And they were basically stored in another office, which was a couple of buildings away from where they worked,
Yeah.
or maybe even another site. But it was the quantum.
Yeah, there was a department in JPL,
Just search for
which
quantum.
in this group does exist.
Just search for quantum if you haven't got it.
Yeah.
Control F, quantum.
Control.
Control F for find.
Yeah.
And then just search for quantum, because I forget that was the first word, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And if it was like quantum.
Yeah. So there's a department in JPL called Quantum Sciences and Technology, and they had these images on one of their systems.
Yes.
So they then started to eavesdrop on part of their network.
Okay, so let's just say a bit about this. So that means the fingerprint, if you like, the electronic fingerprint of each of these thumbnails that was stored in this other card. They scanned because they're obviously network administrator people. They scanned the local network and they found the image with those same electronic fingerprint in this other building, this place called Quantum Sciences or whatever the hell they were called.
Yeah. Quantum
Who were-
science technology.
Who are in a separate building.
Right. So this lends to the theory of image tampering, where I'm assuming that these thumbnails were delivered to the original, well, to these clandestine group first before they officially got retrieved by the official team. So I'm assuming that if they had images that they didn't want people to see, they'll take them off and they'll leave the rest. Is that right?
In other words, these people are a proxy. They are something in the way.
But they're not just getting a copy, are they? They are looking at the originals first to then doctor them or remove what they don't want people to see.
Well,
are they
yeah,
able to do that with this system or not?
This is what's happening. So the image itself has a unique fingerprint. As soon as you tamper with that image, that fingerprint is changed, right? So the images they found in that extra piece of hardware only appeared in this quantum technology place.
So that means that they were separated before.
They were separated away.
So someone's tampering with them before they even get.
At the very least, they're being checked. At the very least, they're being looked at before they're being released, right? But there's another piece of the puzzle coming up, which is truly interesting, and what the guys make of it, I find absolutely fascinating. So let's just have a listen to that.
And found that they were in communication with the one of the rovers in real time.
Correct.
In other words, normally it would take between 6 and 20 minutes to get a message to and then back from the rover because it's on Mars. But they were communicating with it
in real time. And they worked that out from the timestamp of the images and the way, they could tell that these images had a timestamp coming from the rover, and they can compare that with when the actual file had been saved on their system.
And this is the key, folks. The conclusion that these guys come to, they said, well, this department, Quantum Sciences and Technology, have obviously developed faster than light radio communications.
Yeah.
So that's how they're able to get this back door into the rover. And what functionally what was being done to the rover is someone was previewing images, deleting some of them, and modifying some of them. Yes? They were using a specific function to change the image or to delete image.
Okay, so
there's two theories on this. If you go down the Wu way, they have developed this quantum communication system,
Okay,
and they're on Mars,
problem-
or whatever, or
okay, so
the other realistic way is...
fundamentally, right, faster than light radio communications are completely impossible. You can't have radio travelling faster than the speed of light. That's not how electromagnetic radiation works. That is not physically possible. Is it possible they were using some other means of instantaneous communication? Yes, I think that a lot of scientists agree that consciousness seems to travel instantaneously. But the problem with that idea is that you're talking about a building a couple of blocks away from, or a couple of buildings away from where these guys are. They're downloading the pictures, looking at the thumbnails, and then deciding whether the rest of them can look at it or not, or maybe changing them and sending them back
Instantaneously.
Well, at least
Before the
certainly
normal,
not in minutes, but
not the turnaround time that they're used to.
in fractions of
receive the
a
data.
second. Now, of course, this kind of creates a problem either way, because, well, so what that must mean is there's two possibilities in my mind. Either, as you say, either they really have got instantaneous communication using some sort of quantum. I mean, there are theories about quantum superposition and things like this, where although theoretically they haven't quite figured out how it could be possible, it might not be impossible that there is instantaneous communication, and them being called quantum technologies lends to that, first of all, but that could also just
Or
be
is it cover? Yeah.
The second possibility is that there is some sort of deliberate 3-minute, 4-minute, 5-minute hardware delay between what the rover does
Whatever commands it gets
and it gets back to by the time it gets back to so that extra card that's in the system
Is
has
the back
some
door.
sort of 5-minute delay, so that whatever they do, this thing simulates sufficient delay to appear to be on Mars.
It lends to the theory that it's a few thousand miles away instead of millions of miles away.
Exactly.
That, you know, if you're going to get that instantaneous communication link, that is a satellite link. That's
Well, I mean, if
yeah.
you've got instantaneous communication, then why the hell are you using rockets? I mean, that doesn't. There's not a lot of correlation there. If you can get something to travel instantaneously, surely you can get something to travel faster.
especially
too.
commands and so forth
You
for
know,
a spacecraft that's meant to be millions
Well,
of miles
it
away.
would
If
also
was-
mean that you wouldn't have to do the 7 minutes of terror. You would be
Yeah.
able to watch it land live. You would be able to control it live.
Yeah.
You know, all of these problems would disappear. Now, of course, you know, we can look at this in lots of different ways. They might not want to disclose this quantum technology of instantaneous communication. And that might be another reason they're using it to cover up other things on Mars. But obviously, Richard is of the mind that it's because it's on Earth. And when you look at what the likelihood is of, you know,
I think if you step back and objectively look at it from all the information we've received before this particular episode, it would suggest, if you put them all together,
it wouldn't be very hard for somebody high up in NASA to say, no, let's not land it there, let's land it there. That would be a much simpler solution to avoiding contacting the base than going through all of this rigmarole. You would just make it land 100 miles away.
yeah.
And then it wouldn't have a chance of seeing anything. So, you know, to me, that's the right here, right now. That seems to be the case, that these Mars rovers. And what I would also say is that is, to me, why they started bringing in these private companies that get the data first.
Yep, no
Because-
one's they don't have
because
to answer to the
When
government.
this happened, they went, whoa, that was a close one. We've got to find a way of getting it off-site first, so nobody can find anything. And that's how Maven, or whatever they were called, and all these other, you know, the Mars, so they get the photographs way off-site, nothing to do with any NASA administrators.
Yeah.
So they don't have to worry about the
No
3 minutes
accountability,
limits.
no accountability,
And-
nothing. So it gives more credence to the theory that it's on Earth rather than anything.
In my opinion, where we are at this point in the video, yes.
Okay, well, let's see where it goes.
So just to expand on that, there's an extra device on the rover that no one knows about, that the computer system is communicating with surreptitiously, and someone is accessing thumbnails via that link. They're reviewing them in some way, and they're deleting certain images. So there's a third party got a backdoor into the rover, right? And these two engineers, because they, in my opinion, because they're so convinced that the thing's on Mars, they say, well, the only thing we can think of is that this secret department have got faster than light radio comms.
Yeah. And it kind of, when you know, from coming out from our perspective, it kind of makes you chuckle, as we're chuckling now when you read it, because the guys don't really give a reason as to why, you know, they would employ this faster than light communications.
And I just want to also say that, to me, that is exactly what the whole Adam Stelzner, that they are all that convinced.
They're indoctrinated.
If they found out this device was there, that's exactly what they'd believe. Because you are not allowed anywhere near this project unless you are absolutely
on board,
irrecoverably indoctrinated.
Yeah.
You know, there's only two kinds of people in this project: the guys who know the truth, and the guys who are so far indoctrinated. You know, like sort of Brian Cox level indoctrinated is the one way I would describe it. They just would never ever begin to imagine that somebody would say, "Well, hang on a minute. Couldn't we make a lot more money if we just kept it in Greenland?" They just haven't got that kind of thinking. No. They don't have it.
No, it would actually poo-poo any efforts and progress they've made as scientists, and it will destroy any sense of achievement of the projects and the individuals that built the hardware and the scientists that came up with the theories. It just rubbishes all of their hard work the minute they find out, or the minute they can conceive that this project is a ruse, and it's on Earth, and it's never actually been tested to the limits that it was designed to be tested.
I think that's definitely true, but I think it's also interesting that it's how they structure the whole thing. You know, this is JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and yet they have nothing to do with the rocket. They have no control over the rocket. They don't even know the spec of the rocket. They just give them they give the weight, the shape, the size, the sort of temperature, and all the rest of it that this thing can survive. And then the rocket people just say, "Okay, we'll put it on Mars.
Yeah,
it's going to take off there and it's going to land then." And you know, we'll tell you when it's
from there. It's you. From there,
we'll tell you when it's in orbit.
Yeah,
they don't have anything to do with the journey, even though they're JPL, and they were the people that started rocketry in the States.
Yeah,
they've had the whole thing has been shifted over into this part of NASA that historically were all about rocketry and are now all about robotics. And I just find that a really confusing thing. I mean, if you sort of look at the history of it, they just talk about it. Oh yeah, JPL was assigned the first this, and why is it called JPL then?
Yeah, it's redundant.
It doesn't even make sense.
It's redundant. It should be called Boston Dynamics.
Well, it should be called, you know, Mars Rocketry or whatever the hell. Sorry, Mars Robotics or something.
Yeah.
Why would you give it to JPL? It's almost the answer's right in your face.
Yeah, they're deliberately putting it under the guise of something that really has nothing to do with the subject matter. That they're involved.
It's almost like you haven't even thought about the name of the company you're joining. You know, that's how
you come in and fly rockets. No, sir. We make Tamiya remote control cars on Mars.
Yeah, we don't want you thinking about anything outside of your exact job description, and that's the kind of feeling I get about the whole of this.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's see where we're going.
An explanation which is just as plausible, more plausible in my opinion, is that the thing's on the Earth and it's been communicated via some low-flying satellite.
But I mean, even if we take their explanation as being the correct one, you know, unusual though it is, it clearly, you know, provides some sort of scenario where, or it suggests, I should say, a scenario where the images are being previewed, they are being pre-examined before being dealt with in some other way. So that in of itself is significant.
And just to go into a little bit of the electronics, as Andrew mentioned, this rover uses what's called a VME backplane. Now, I've worked with them for over 10 years in my work at Rolls-Royce and other companies, and this is it's industry standard, right? It's not something which is it's industry standard, right? It's industry standard electronics. The main processor module in the rover, it is ruggedized, so it's more robust than something you'd get in a power station or something like that. But they're using the same backplane, which I've found quite interesting. Now, normally in VME systems, you would have spare slots. So it's a bit like your computer, which has PCI slots. You normally have 1 or 2 spare in case you want to monitor something, or you could do development with that spare slot. You could use it for anything.
That's right.
And is it the case that the rover in question, I think it was the Spirit rover, does have a single, perhaps redundant slot, spare slot, and all they've done, they've taken the rover out, the rocket, it's gone to the rover test site, and all they've done is pushed another card into the rack and then added a radio transceiver that the card is talking to. And that would be a piece of cake. But one thing you would have to do to get that to work, you'd have to, as Andrew said, you'd have to modify the software in the main processor in order to communicate via the VME bus, which is what these engineers realised.
Yeah.
So someone's added a bit of code and a bit of hardware so that the thing can be controlled and the images can be deleted via a radio link. Now, that radio link could easily be sent to a local satellite dish, and they could be sitting in the next office at JPL. So you've got one department who are getting the images and they think they're coming from Mars, and there's another department over the road who know it's on the Earth who are accessing the images in real time and deleting the ones they don't want them to see.
Yeah, and you could also argue that some of the artifacts that we've seen, perhaps those are being inserted. They're inserting some of those into the image set to make people like us raise some of these questions. Who knows?
Yeah, it's. But if you've got nerd leanings, then you'll
enjoy reading this. Yeah, if you're a bit of a techie software person, you can form your own judgment of this. But I couldn't find any flaws in it, and it's quite a sad story as well, because at the end of this, the guy who's written the story, he describes this scenario where the computer that he was using gets it gets broken into, doesn't it? The lid gets taken off.
Yeah.
So he gets spooked by this.
Yeah.
And although he's not found out and he's not taken aside by anyone at NASA, he decides to jump ship. And the friend that he was working with, he basically never speaks to him again, because he doesn't want to think that they will, if they're together.
Yeah. Because what happens is, it's when they start spying on this other department to see if they are communicating via this protocol. Someone's obviously picked up on that, and when he's gone home at night, there's a tech come in, removed his hard drive, copied all the data off it, put it back in, but they'd put one of the power cables in wrong
way around,
because he'd been in it the previous day, and he knew someone had been in and took his hard drive and then returned the hard drive. So someone was eavesdropping on him. Eavesdropping on this other team, but nothing was done to reprimand him or anything.
No, well, he basically left NASA, the guy telling the story. He left NASA because he felt that they might catch up with him, so he just left. And I think he'd worked there for quite a number of years, and he was quite sad about that.
So, of course, this whole thing could just be a load of Reddit nonsense.
That's what the audience needs to understand. This is a blog. So we have to take it with a pinch of salt. This is someone's opinion, an expert's opinion. I'm assuming this expert's been vetted by his name, and Richard and co have
he's
researched
completely
that.
anonymous. It's completely anonymous because this guy's in fear of, well, first of all, originally losing his pension, but later being found on a railway line in a car, having been crushed to death. Yeah. So it's completely anonymous. There's no vetting. We've got no idea who wrote this.
Right,
all we know is from the authenticity with which it was written, appears to be pretty good. And as you can see, we've got one electronics engineer in Richard on the left. We've got an Open University professor or lecturer on the right. And they both read it too, and they can finally fault with it. And I have to say that from what I saw of it, it's extremely convincing. But you've also got to say the idea that he would leave NASA because he found his disk, he'd been looking in his own computer the day before. I suppose if you're one of the techies, that is pretty likely. But then someone came in, copied all the data off his disk, and then didn't put the power cable in back
Correctly.
It's possible. Maybe they were in the middle of being. And when he says correctly, maybe he means it wasn't quite plugged in all the way. Rather than being plugged in wrong, so it wouldn't work. So it's possible, but it's a fascinating idea. But it could just be. But it's also 2010, which is very, very early to be hypothesizing that the Spirit rover isn't really on Mars. Nobody was really talking about that back in 2010.
No, because the technology was so virgin at that time. Back onto the tampering. It sounds like CIA to me, doesn't it? It sounds like they are like we mentioned earlier. They are subcontracting out companies outside that don't have any oversight, but obviously they have CIA agents within that company to monitor what's going on. And the communications, if they're picking up that communications are being observed from an outside source, the first thing they would do is trace it back to source and find out exactly what these individuals know.
Well, to me, I think it's just more of the sort of duality of NASA. That there's the front-facing part of NASA, the Stelzners of this world, and then there's the people, the puppet masters. The handlers, if you want, Now, whether they are, the same kind of people who killed the guys in Apollo 1. These people exist in NASA. Let's not muck about, Those guys died in a terrible fire while the Apollo was on the ground in a room full of engineers. How's that even possible, that you could lose 3 people in a spaceship on the ground in
on
NASA
a static test
and lose no one in space? How is that possible? How could you do that by accident? If you're good enough to keep those people alive in space, you're sure as heck good enough to get the door open in time to get them out. There is another force within NASA that, and the front-facing people are completely unaware of it. That's what I think it is. But I think that's true of a lot of these. I think that the vast majority of people in something like GCHQ are good people. They don't realise that they're developing stuff for people to misuse it against the public. No. They think they're doing a really good job.
Well, they're the nerds that are enjoying creating something that's never been done before.
Exactly.
They're not the ones that execute its actual usage and decide how it's deployed.
They don't
care about that. Exactly. Why would they? That's not the fun for them.
No,
the fun for them, once it leaves the shop, their work's done. They're on to the next project.
Exactly.
They're not going to care.
The math or the physics or the whatever.
Or the engineering,
The engineering, exactly. They're not there for that. How it gets used, or it's like the CIA guys getting a family out of Iraq into America who've got knowledge about, nuclear...
biological weapons
or whatever.
Yeah.
That's their job, and they think, they're doing it for America. It doesn't occur to them who starts the war and why. They're just there doing a tiny little thing.
Yeah.
And that's what their focus is. But it doesn't occur to them that the whole war is completely unnecessary. And that's how all of these things seem to work. It's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the people are there working their guts away for a tiny minority that are...
to reap the benefit and to misuse and to abuse.
Use and abuse. And I think that seems to be a pattern the world over.
Especially people that have more... especially governments that have more resources and have more to lose. And have more investor interest and so forth.
I think it seems to me to be. Well, I think this disease, wherever it began, and I think it did begin in the last few hundred years, it is global. It seems to be, there's evidence in everything, whether you're talking about COVID or whatever. Everybody who didn't want to bring the vaccines in suddenly died and was replaced by a new leader. This whole thing seems to be global.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
I totally agree.
And unfortunately, once you know about it, it's a very difficult thing to forget about.
Yeah, and it's a rocky road to take. It's a path that a lot of people have lost their lives for to expose. So
yes.
that's why you only hear about it under the sheet. It's very, very low key.
And that's why Richard D. Hall's in court right now. Hasn't had the verdict yet, but I mean,
Yeah.
whether he's going to lose his house, who knows?
Well, it's a sad state of affairs.
Anyway, let's enjoy ourselves while we can.
Yeah.
Another frustrating thing is it's an anonymous blog,
Yes.
but there's a legitimate reason for that. You're not going to put your name to that for obvious reasons. They will have signed the Official Secrets Act.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And I did wonder, as I said earlier on, whether it was just a good yarn. But having read the whole thing and considered the circumstances,
It could be disinformation, but
it could be.
It's not. It's something which is. It's not on some major website. No
it's
one's
just
picked
a
up
blog.
on it that I'm aware of.
Yeah. And I mean, remember this is dated 2010, so this is before Richard and I started considering these scenarios where the rovers are not on Mars. Way before, it was 3 years or so, 4 years before that. So
2010.
It's not like we've been fed this as disinformation because,
Yeah. Now we'll just briefly mention the landing, particularly of Curiosity, because when these rovers are sent to Mars, they have quite a payload.
Several tons, isn't it?
The whole thing put together, especially in Curiosity rover, it's got a heat shield and it's got the parachute mechanism, and it's got this thing which lowers it down and then on strings, and then it gets these thrusters then fire it off. So it weighs a lot.
I think it's about a ton for the actual Curiosity rover itself. I think nearly a ton, isn't it?
So the speed that it comes into the Martian atmosphere is phenomenal, and that the energy for that has to be dissipated or has to be accounted for somewhere. So there's a chap done quite a lot of calculations on this, which again it's nerdy perhaps if you're a nerd mechanical engineer, then you can download this.
You'll like it.
You'll like it. But he reckons there's just no way the thing could dissipate the amount of energy that it has to.
That's right, because we don't want to go too much. It's better if you read the document to get the technical detail. But in essence, what happens is everyone's seen a shooting star at one time or another, which is a piece of dust burning up in the atmosphere. The Curiosity rover in the packaging is like a giant shooting star, and it's travelling at high speed when it gets to the atmosphere. So the basic problem is, how do you stop it burning up before it lands? And as people will probably realise, you have to have a heat shield. So the document that Richard put together includes these calculations about how the heat shield can do its job and basically dissipate the energy from the high speed of travel, successfully. And there are certain basic calculations that you can make about the material, and he basically comes to the conclusion in this document that from the amount of heat that this would have to dissipate, it was like factors of probably hundreds or tens of thousands even, times the amount it would need to be he calls it infinitium or something, this material or something.
And the other aspect, Andrew, is the parachute, where he's currently doing calculations on the parachute for both Spirit and Opportunity and Curiosity. He suspects there's problems with that as well. Now we've mentioned the...
So let's just talk about this just for a moment, just to explain, because I think they do go, because on one side we've got an electronic mechanical engineer and we've got a lecturer, and these guys know this stuff so well, they go through it so fast. What we're talking about here is the physical braking.
Yeah.
And I mean braking as an AK, not EAK. Yeah. Brake, so the slowing down using the atmosphere. Now,
from a trajectory from space.
So this thing is arriving. So this is a much longer journey than the moon, obviously. So, and the Mars gravitational pull is much more powerful than the moon. It's over twice but about 2.5 times as powerful. So this thing has been accelerating for a long time. So
without any resistance.
So the trans-Martian injection, you go much faster away from Earth. It takes much more fuel. You can only use about 2/3 of what the mass you can to the moon, or about somewhere between a half and 2/3. So you need far more fuel. So it needs to be going much faster. So the effect of Earth slowing it down is much less. Okay, so that's the first thing.
Yeah.
But then it gets away from Earth's gravitational pull faster. So it's travelling much quicker at an average speed of much quicker.
Well, it's in a vacuum and it has no gravitational pull from any other objects. So it's just accelerating constantly. To a point, based on its mass and based on the energy.
Once it begins to get under the effect of Mars, it begins to accelerate constantly.
Because it's being pulled then.
Towards Mars, in a zero resistance. So by the time this thing's reaching Mars, it's doing something like 6 kilometers per second. Now, that is extremely fast. It's nowhere near as fast as escape velocity from Earth, but Earth's gravitational pull is much stronger. It's 2.5 times. So obviously, when this thing's coming in, it's doing about 40% of the speed it took away from Earth, right, roughly speaking. But the problem you got with Mars is you've got no atmosphere to slow it down. So what are you going to do? Well, roughly speaking, taking into account the speed of resistance of air,
it'll be like a shallow trajectory where it has to stay as high as possible for as long as possible to slow down more, to have more opportunity to slow down more.
Right, very gradually.
Yes.
Very gradually indeed. The problem is, the only way you can get rid of heat is radiation. It's not like coming into Earth where you've got the atmosphere to convect, to conduct, and all the rest of it away.
Yeah.
So it's coming in at an incredibly shallow angle. The problem is that that's not how they do it. They don't come in at that shallow angle at all.
Yes, because they're reliant on the sky crane.
They come in quite steep.
Yeah.
So it would, and if you look at that graph he was just showing about the thermal units it would have to get rid of, it's just beyond imagination. It would literally have to be the resistance between the front of where the heat buildup would be and where the rover would be would have to be beyond any material that as far as I know we have. Because even if you filled it with loads of vacuums, so everything had to radiate, you're still never going to complete with how slow the heat's radiating off of it.
Yeah.
How slow you can get rid of heat is so slow.
And obviously, I'm assuming there's no internal cooling system on the heat shield itself. There's no pipes with liquid to aid in the dispersion of this immense amount of heat from all the friction going on.
Well, even if you did that, the only place you've only got the underside. You saw the shape of it. It's got that flat heat shield bit, and then it's got where the
concave. Yeah,
then it's got that bit where the
dome,
rover lives.
The dome where the
so
live, yeah.
Even if you had pipes going through all the way around the rover, the biggest problem with that idea is you're going to cook the rover.
It's an oven, isn't it?
Exactly. So, and that's the absolute last thing you want to do.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, you couldn't do that. So, the whole problem with this system is the angle of attack appears to be all wrong, and you've got zero control over it.
And I guess when the initial stage of the entry is over, you're then moving on to there was a parachute stage at one point.
There's a parachute stage.
It wasn't enough to obviously land it directly. Previous missions, they had an inflatable ball. They inflated into a ball and it just physically bounced. This system is so reliant on so many different processes before.
Yes, because the sky crane is basically developed to allow you to land anything. That is the conception of it. That's why they spent so much effort on it. Is that it is basically a system with capability to calculate the mass of what you've given it,
the trajectory it's coming in.
Well, not so much the trajectory, but let's just say the velocity it's coming in with, and it's able to calculate how to slow down in time, just like SpaceX does.
And it also gives you the opportunity to pick your landing zone a little bit better because you
identifies a flat area with radar, and
then
stuff like
then
this,
it drops
and it puts it down on the ground.
Yeah.
And that's why we went through all that. But the problem is, none of the heat dispersal appears to work according to these guys' calculations. Now, I haven't been over them in detail, but this guy is a mechanical engineer, and when you sit down and go through it and find it to be thousands of times out
from what
would be physically possible, that's a problem. If it was twice that, 3 times wrong, you'd say, oh well, you've miscalculated this, you miscalculated. But he's the guy's a professional and he's thousands of times out, which makes you wonder,
what are we being fed here?
What the heck is going on? How can it be that wrong?
The Curiosity rover team in the press conference, if you want to watch it, just go online and have a look for the Curiosity rover press conference and see if you think these engineers really are capable of getting an object to Mars, landing it on the surface and then communicate it back with Earth. And here's them in the control room, Andrew. I don't know what they're all doing here because, as I said, it takes between 6 and 20 minutes for the signals to get to and then back from Mars. So they can't possibly be controlling the mission in any way. It's all got to be automatic. So what are they doing in this room? But let's just take a look at this. This is the moment where the first thumbnail comes back, Andrew.
EDL ops, the signal to Odyssey remains strong.
Flight EDL images are starting to come down. We're beginning to get
All right,
images,
we got images
from Odyssey.
coming down, folks.
If your comm configures
Some of these people must be in on it. Let's just have a see if we can tell.
Who are the handlers?
Who are the handlers?
And who are the sheep?
And who are the sheep? Because to me,
The guy crying is definitely the head sheep.
Or
he's indoctrinated
he's
beyond
just been
belief.
up in the cupboard with the onions getting ready, and he's the main handler. Who knows? But let's just go back a bit and have another look at this.
stand by for images. Rear has
Seeing
10
thumbnails
images.
coming down.
EDL
This is the moment where the first thumbnail comes back, Andrew.
See, there's a whole nother room of people there that we don't really get to see what they're doing or their emotions or anything.
EDL ops, the signal to Odyssey remains
It's an office
strong.
block,
Exactly. Look, there's a whole nother
flight
room.
EDL images are starting to come down. We're beginning to get
All right,
images,
we got images
from Odyssey.
coming down, folks.
If your comm configures stand by for images. Rear has
Seeing
10
thumbnails
images.
coming down.
Odyssey data is still strong.
Odyssey data is very strong.
Odyssey's nice and high in the sky.
So Odyssey presumably is a satellite, is it?
Yeah, I think Odyssey is one of the relay satellites they use.
So the signal's already strong. They've got the first thumbnail back. So literally, this is after it's landed. The sky crane has done its job,
And it's a 3.5 minute.
landed it properly.
It's a 3.5 minute.
They got the
time
first
lapse.
thumbnail back, and they're also getting the signal from Odyssey to say, yeah, we've got good signal.
Yeah.
It's in the right place.
Basically, the guy in the other office that's got this data beforehand it's just go, yeah.
So-
we landed 3 minutes ago. It's great. Just tell them what they need to hear.
So,
Get the cake
so
out.
let's just go back to the issue of what we were talking about earlier with the extra module and the programmed however long it is delayed.
This is where it comes into play, isn't it? This is where it's not just. I don't think it will be just thumbnails. It will be command and control.
Oh, definitely.
It's not gonna
definitely the
be-
other one. It has
It
other
has to be
command and control.
Yeah.
And also it'll have because it's
It'll have
it's
to-
an interesting idea, but obviously a lot of the pictures that come back have to be older pictures. There's no way that in 3 minutes you could have enough time to adjust every single picture you need to adjust. I mean, that's
No.
Ridiculous.
But you got to remember that at this stage, the rover's not deployed. It's only had the limitations is 2 cameras because it's just landed.
And it's only doing thumbnails anyway.
And it's only doing thumbnails, so they have enough time. 3 minutes is enough time for a couple of pictures of Sky Crane hovering, Sky Crane lowering, and confirmation that it's touched the surface and it's there. Then obviously some telemetry data to say, yeah, I'm still alive and have been cooked. So it's a limited amount of information, but it's just enough to get everyone up in arms and crying.
But these guys have now found out that their rover has successfully landed, so you would be extremely happy, because you've been sitting around for the last 6 months thinking, what if it blows up?
Not only that, you've been working on this for the last 12 years or something.
Yeah. So you can understand why they'd be this happy. I mean, Richard's sort of talking about the fact that why they. I think this is a jubilant time.
These are the sheep. They're the honest players here. So you would expect them to celebrate like this. This is not any sort of fake.
And also, they've got a job for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, if it had crashed, people might have been saying, well, I
think that guy would have still been crying.
I think people might be saying, what went wrong? Who's responsible for this?
Yeah.
And and of course now they're going to get to have their press conference, and so of course they're happy. Yeah. Anyway, let's
some Costco cake.
Let's see what else we're going to discover.
At this time, we're standing by for images. Thumbnails are complete.
Got thumbnails.
Full image complete. Full image complete.
It's the wheel. It's the wheel.
There we go. We can see a wheel image. We are wheels down on Mars.
This is actually adjusting
Oh my God. We'll do a proper hug on the other side.
Okay, so that was NASA receiving the first thumbnail from Curiosity. And it's obviously from Mars, isn't it? You can tell 64
Clearly.
pixels by 64 pixels.
As
so
many as that?
yeah,
Well, it must clearly be, yeah.
It's obviously on Mars, isn't it?
It must be, yeah, 64 by 6. That's much higher resolution than I would have expected from NASA.
Right. Now, I've been in communication with NASA. I wrote them a Freedom of Information request because what I'm interested in as a former engineer, I'm fairly well up on how products get tested. And something like a Mars rover would have batteries and batteries of tests, and there would be environmental testing and what I call soak testing, where the product is put in a working environment at its working temperature, the environment at the working temperature and pressures, etc., and its functions are operated over a long period, a period which is comparable to its life. So I would expect a rover to have at least a month worth of environmental testing, where it's at those low temperatures for a month. And every day they're waking it up and they're moving it about and they're doing tests and they're seeing if it will function throughout that whole month. So I want to see the document from NASA which lists all of those tests. It's probably going to be this thick. It's going to have engineers' signatures on it, and that's what I've asked NASA for. And they've asked me to be more specific about what I wanted. So I'm in email contact with someone from the JPL library, and I'm going to see if I can get that document because. What proves that the thing can work is not the design of it; it's the testing. That's the proof that it's fit for purpose. And also in the document, you can read the emails that I sent to Robert Manning, who was one of the chief engineers on the Curiosity rover program, who basically ran away from mine and Andrew's questions. He answered one question and then we didn't hear from him
I
again.
think he answered our questions because it was a case of mistaken identity, wasn't it? I think you'd explained that before.
Maybe.
Yeah, because he thought that it was another NASA person writing to him when actually it was...
Well, that was initially... there's two Robert Mannings in NASA. Yeah. I wrote to the wrong one, so this Robert Manning forwarded my email to the one I meant to send it to, and I think he felt obliged to reply. the first time because it had come from someone else in NASA.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else you want to add, Andrew, with regards to this?
Well, yeah. I mean, the whole thing you were saying right there about the functional testing. I mean, something like the rover. You've probably got a year of test work to be done at least. Like separate system tests, and then you have an integration test where you put all the modules together and check that it all works properly together. As you say, you use environmental ovens and environmental enclosures to make sure it's going to work in those temperatures. That's something I saw where I worked at Plessy. They had an environmental oven that they put all the components in.
I think they have shown the environmental test chamber. But I want to see details of all the documentation.
Documents, wouldn't it, with the signatures and dates and so forth. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because those documents are usually extremely specific. Because when you write a test procedure, right, you have to assume that the person who's carrying out the tests has no knowledge of the project, right? So you can hand that to any engineer, and it will give all of the parts lists with the numbers, and that you can go and get them out of the stores or whatever to build the rig and put it. This is the type of chamber you need. Everything listed, the capability of the oscilloscopes that you need. That's all the parts you need. Right. Instruction 1. Put this board on there. So it's like noddy.
Yeah.
It's like, so the actual procedure for carrying out a test is normally extremely well defined.
Yes.
Because you have to be able to repeat, they might have to repeat it in 5 years' time when people have left.
That's right.
So
that's right.
it's the documentation, why can't that be made public? Because I'm not aware that it is public. There's nothing secret in a test.
No, I mean, it's a publicly funded project, and I don't think there's that much technology that's patented, etc.
Incidentally, perhaps viewers can help me with, just before we finish, Andrew, just one thing I want to point out, and that is the VME rack, which I suspect is probably ruggedized to a degree. It's probably not an industry standard type VME rack. It'll have some sort of more protection on it. But the architecture electronically will be the same. And I'm saying, is there a free slot where an extra card could have been put in? I've not been able to find any photographs of the VME rack on Spirit and Opportunity rovers. Right? I've found photographs of every other component, the cameras, the arms, the solar panels, the power system. I've not found any images of the VME rack, which is the box of electronics which controls the rover. I've done Google searches, no photographs of it.
It could use a sort of more highly integrated version of the VME bus, that wasn't with the same pinout to save space or something like that.
Well, as far as I'm aware, it's not. It's just a standard VME bus, and the card, which is a RAD 6000, which is a fairly standard processor, but it's bespoke.
Ruggedized, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all the components on it can withstand certain blasts of radiation, right? Now, there's plenty of photographs of the card which goes into the rack.
Right.
Right, the main processor card, because that's used on other satellites.
That's right.
It's not just used in the rover.
Probes,
In fact, it's been used on quite a lot of space technology, that RAD 6000. But no photographs of Spirit Opportunity electronics rack. I want to see a photograph of that rack, and I want to see is there room for another card? Yeah. All right. Remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.
Right, so that brings us to the end of our Mars journey with Richard. Let's come to some conclusions here. I mean, obviously we are reviewing Richard's portrayal of and his rationale for the theory that the Mars rover is not on Mars, it's on Earth, and he has given us, the audience, and you, the evidence he has, be it photographic, telemetry, data, and what NASA has actually put out there to the public. Where are you coming from on this? What's your position, Simon?
Well, to me, the thing that keeps hanging in my head is that graph where they showed us, and I'll put this on screen. We're not looking at it right now, but I'll put it on screen for the audience. Is that timeline of the Mars missions, how it sort of began in 72. Then they saw the face, and nothing happened for sort of 15 years. And then suddenly, once they started thinking to themselves, hang on a minute, we can do something here.
Well, I think it's part public pressure. I mean, you have to show up. If you can go all the way to Mars on a satellite, in the 60s and 70s, why haven't you gone back? And the questions started piling up. I don't think Richard Hoagland and all that lot helped, because they're screaming out to the public, we're paying for these guys. Why have they not gone back? And I think they had to do something. They had to get out there.
But to me, the whole thing just kind of fits together with the moon. It started out with the moon. So they started out with the Mercury and all of that. They were behind the Russians allegedly. But I mean,
the Phobos
to me,
and all that sort of,
to me, it was just a complete lack of interest in putting money into it, because they had stuff that didn't even need rockets. So why bother? And then people start saying, look, we've got to do something. The Russians are doing rocket stuff and they're making us look less. And a lot of people in places like Parliament, were saying we need to be leading or we're going to be in trouble. They didn't understand that people like SAIC and the Backroom Boys had stuff that made that stuff look absurd.
Yeah.
The
secret space program stuff.
And so pressure built up and up and up and up. And Kennedy came along and said, I've got a plan here. I'm going to get them to disclose. We're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. He's saying this in 61, giving them like 8-9 years to get a man onto the moon, which was a completely impossible mission without disclosing the technology they had that made the Russians just look irrelevant. And of course, Kennedy also wanted peace with the Russians and much more open communication. He had secret lines through to Khrushchev, etc. And the SAIC mob were like, this guy's going to give our anti-gravity stuff to the Russians. This is crazy. Then you got the CIA with the whole Cuba invasion thing, trying to set him up with the Bay of Pigs to invade Cuba with crashing buildings into skyscraper plans and all the rest of it. Yeah. It's all fitting together, right? And so then we get to the situation where they've got no choice but to kill Kennedy. So they bring Nixon in, and Nixon's like, well, do we have to do it for real? Surely we can make some money here. And that's where
I know a guy called Stan.
Yeah, I know this guy. This guy is great with photography. Perhaps we could get him to do something. We'll get him to build. If we put a lot of money into a film, we can get the public to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're going a bit off piece. You're chronicling what's led up to this, I understand where you're coming from.
What I mean is that then they sent the thing to Mars, and it took pictures of something they'd never even begun to imagine. Because whatever they were doing with the anti-grav stuff, they hadn't communicated back to whoever at NASA that there was stuff on Mars that was going to cause a real problem.
Why would they? Because it's compartmentalised, and why would you talk to the sheep when you're playing with things?
So obviously, so this stuff was going through Parliament and the Backroom Boys, Congress, and they couldn't prevent it, and it took the picture they really didn't want it to take, and they were like, shut it down. Let's come up with this ridiculous rocket that can land at 300 knots with its own wings, but can take off at 15,000 miles an hour without any effect of them, and all this other stuff. And we went into this sort of low Earth orbit, which we've been stuck in now for
space
40
stations,
years,
yeah.
and space stations and all this other crud, which we had in the 60s. I mean, okay, they put a few more people, but the Russians were doing that in the early 60s.
Yeah.
And we're still doing exactly the same thing. It's just got a bit more room inside of it. And, to me, that is the timeline. And they had to get away from Mars because the blokes who were already there were like, well, listen, we've got to investigate this fake stuff. You can't come back here.
Yeah. There's things here that we really, really don't want anyone else to know. That links, whatever history we have.
Exactly. And it got
to that.
It got sort of 20 years down the line. They managed to sort of do the same thing with well, I think they started to use a slightly different
Well,
system.
they were doing things like Voyager. They had all these other projects going on. Let's be fair to NASA. They had other aspirations as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but I mean,
it was
I still
multifaceted,
find
to be
Voyager
fair.
a very confusing concept. I mean, if you think about what America is and how it came to be where it is, that would be the equivalent of the Native Americans building a boat with a sail, filling it up with bits of paper with "these are women," this is where their boobs are. This is where this is what we eat. This is where we're vulnerable. This is where we sleep.
Yeah.
This is how you creep up on us as hackers, and pointing it towards Europe and just pushing it away.
Yeah.
That's how stupid Voyager is. I just find it so hard to believe that a nation that came about the way America came about would do something that stupid.
It
just seems like such a bizarre, and that to me is how the whole of the sort of front of NASA began. They started to pick people who were so, we're scientists, we believe in a scientist, we can't condone this this sort of idea that a scientist is a perfect human being. In other words, naive.
Well, they are.
That they have no concept of the reality. It's just like he says in Wrath of Khan. Just like I was saying, scientists are always manipulated by the military, and they always are because they're so.
That's
naive.
where the money is. Well, that's where the money is, and they are the gateway to their dreams, to give them an opportunity to create everything that's in their mind.
Exactly, and people who start to do experiments on mice. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I think you've got to be mad to do a lot of the stuff these people do. But it's all in the name of science. But we're discovering things about behaviour. No, you're not. You're torturing mice.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where the sort of beginning of modern NASA came, is the Voyager kind of crew. And they started to realise that they could get these guys to do a project without actually knowing if it was real or not. And that's the beginning to me of spirit, opportunity, curiosity, and perseverance. And that's where we are now. We have these sort of front room boys and girls who build these very, very advanced and amazing pieces of equipment with all this high technology from all kinds of amazing providers around the world. Well, mostly in China, but around America too. They give them to the rocket guys, the ESA or NASA, or wherever it is, or SpaceX,
and they shoot them.
And then they
shoot the projects, not the people.
And they put it in a plane, fly it out to Greenland, and give it to the backroom boys.
Yeah,
and that's because they can't afford. Because they
can't afford to fail, because that means that they're redundant.
They can't afford to fail because then they're going to lose all their money.
Yeah, they're redundant as
an
organisation.
Of course, the secret space program has got so much more advanced now, because they don't have to put up with health and safety or unions or any of that kind of stuff. If you're in that, you are.
But the infrastructure of the secret space program has always been conspired to be off planet anyway. A lot of it's not here.
It's on the far side of the moon.
It's
whatever.
It's in the solar system, lurking around it. That's what the hearsay. But back on topic, you're right. They have every reason to have two facets. The front room boys and the back room boys.
Well, I'm just trying to put the whole thing together.
Yeah.
From what we talked about with the moon.
Yeah.
To me, human behaviour is what gives away the truth. If you look at all the facts, you just wind up stuck in exactly the same place as a scientist. They can fool you. Because what you can take to be, we know it because of this radiation, because this was obscured by this.
You're blinkered, and
you're starting to look at stuff that isn't necessarily. They can fake that. There's all kinds of things that factually can be faked, which will so easily pull the wool over. It's like the reflectors on the moon. It's such an easy thing to give you the data to show you that it's there. The scientists firing the laser didn't build the laser. They've got the oscilloscope, but they didn't build a receiver. All of that stuff has got all kinds of ways of plugging a board in somewhere and giving them any data they want. And that's fundamentally, to me, what's become the problem is that we have become so easy to trick. And I mean, look at the problems we have with the news now. The whole world's gone completely bonkers. And NASA and all the rest of it, for me, are just another facet of it. Like we talked about with the washing machine. They are literally our
window. The window, and the only window we have, because no one knows any better. Because you're not an expert. We are just Joe Blogs public.
I mean,
we'll eat what we're fed.
What does a Russian think about space? Do they have? What does a Chinese person think of? Do they have a completely different idea about Mars compared to us?
Any Russians and Chinese, please leave a comment.
You know, what does the Indian stuff tell them about Mars and the Moon? Do they get the same readings? Do they get the same? Or I mean, are these guys all in cahoots? Or do we get different? I mean, I don't even know. They're certainly never. They might say, "Oh, there was a Chinese thing that went around the moon," but they never ever give you any data.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, who knows? What do I think about the conclusions? I think, you know, quite literally, it's just like you always say. The truth is, we don't even know the reality of the information we have. You know, we don't know that any of the stuff we have is really from Mars. For me, the really big giveaways are the skies are a real problem to me that just won't go away.
Yeah.
The fact that the first pictures came back appeared to have blue skies.
But that's your human condition again, where why would you feel the need to filter the sky colour? What wool are you trying to pull over our eyes with that? Because it's always been known as the red planet. Let's colour it red. Everyone will believe it. Yeah.
But also,
if it
had that much atmosphere, you just wouldn't be able to get the pictures of it with a telescope that people get. So, to me, the photographs they send back from Mars are incompatible with what amateur astronomers, recover with, you know, a telescope that quite easily fits in this room. You know, so that's... It all adds up towards, to me, Rich's theory being the most plausible thing.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, from all the information that we've been exposed to from Richard's investigation, there have, like you've said, there have been some sticking points that just scream out to me that why would you do that? What is your rationale unless you are covering something up? You know, firstly, we've just mentioned it, the filtration of this images being read when we have other images. The multitude of images from the different rock formations and types, and the images of the atmosphere from the ground being different colours at different times, you know, the images of footprints in the sand, the images of tampering with the equipment, with fingerprints or with dust on certain places but not on others, which makes no sense. The pictures of bones that look clearly like bones, well, for me most of them were pretty rubbish, but you know, the vertebrae one of the spine was for me a eye-opener.
Because it's not a fossil.
You then have the more theoretical side of, you know, its conception, how it was tested, what sort of equipment they had on there, the communication issues that they, you know, the delays, and how would you control something that's so intricate and so complex from so far away with such a delay? You know, I can barely fly my remote control plane and my my drone, and it's right in front of my face. You know, these elements all culminated together just raise more questions, and question why do we need to have these questions if we are reliant on this organization to be the spearhead of science and to show us, to teach us about our solar system? Why cake it in so much mystery? Why, you know, a little bit away from the topic, why cut feeds when you see things strange? This is where these guys are meant to be the scientists. They're meant to be the wanderers. They're meant to pull us into their world. They're not. They're hiding things from their world.
Most fundamentally of all, if there were people in NASA saying that's definitely a crinoid, and we still don't. And now we're saying there's one minute there's
that's
water
another
on
thing.
Mars.
Yeah.
1 minute it's water on Mars, then
The-
there is
the
water on
lichens.
Mars.
There's lichens on there.
Then we do a successful test for life. Then it's not conclusive. I mean, what the hell kind of science is this?
Fossilized shark teeth. I mean, why is it so muddy? Why are you not being? Why is it not clear? Why, we're meant to. This is meant to inspire generations. This is meant to help us learn as a species about the solar system, but it's not. It's just lying to us in little pieces, and we'll give you a little crumb here, we'll give you a little crumb there, but that's not really a crumb. It's a bit of dirt. The fact that we're constantly being misled from so many facets of the information that we receive just leads to more questions. We shouldn't be questioning something that's meant to be educational. We shouldn't have to question it. When you're not someone that's within that field, you shouldn't be left, well, that doesn't make sense. And for me, I believe Richard has exposed something here personally. If it was just a simple 2 or 3 pieces of evidence, fine, that could be answered. But a lot of this can't be answered with a straight face, especially not from the source. You go out to question these individuals from the organisation, and you get nothing back, or you get prosaic rubbish that just doesn't make any sense.
That's a very good point. That he's sending freedom of information requests to NASA for the testing, and to my knowledge, he hasn't got anything back in 2024.
Yeah.
Of course, nowadays they wouldn't touch him because, he's or to the BBC, he's off YouTube and all the rest of it. But it's an excellent point that somebody who should know all about the testing, because they did it for years. These guys must have done the testing for years. No one else could have done the testing. Well, unless there was a completely separate test department. But if there was a completely separate test department, why didn't we see the separate test department when they were doing the drop test?
Yeah, and the wet testing, like you mentioned in this last episode, why haven't we seen any of that? Why haven't we seen it set on fire or put underwater? Or why aren't they showing that, the real bones of the test? This thing's meant to travel millions of miles, thousands of miles a second. Why aren't we seeing these things, and why aren't they disclosing it to their public? We're British citizens. If I was an American citizen, I know the Black Vault does this FOIA stuff, but I would just be chasing these down. But you have these people like Hoagland, and you have these people like Greenwald and things like that chasing this stuff down, but they're just being lied to. These are taxpayers, and they're just being lied to.
Someone like Hoagland, who was their baby, he was their official reporter for, I can't remember which channel it was, the official science reporter. And then as soon as he started saying, hang on a minute, that's back projection, they just went, whoa, we've got to get rid of this guy.
Yeah, get away from us. Yeah, you're not part of the sheep team.
So I mean, it's very, very clear. If you want to be successful, you've got to be absolutely, completely indoctrinated.
Got to be on board the system.
So this channel's going nowhere.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that if we were doing a channel about debunking Richard, if that was our goal.
Well, we're not trying to debunk it. We're objectively sat here and listening to evidence, and we're listening to that evidence is being pushed back from the source.
If we had a goal of debunking Richard, regardless of what he said, if we picked him up, because there are a lot of mistakes. Yes. We talked about a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things they're overlooking. There's a lot of things I think that they think about in the wrong way. Because obviously when you first speak to someone like Douglas, where he gives you this incredible idea, and you're like, wow, this is a real scoop for my chat, and you get
he's a bit subjective,
but
then you see the subjective side of him, which taints his information, even though a lot of it makes sense.
Well, I think on the whole, looking at Douglas's way of thinking, I think his way of thinking is, obviously it's a bit sort of spiritual and left field.
But you need to be in this field.
But I think I put a lot of weight in, not necessarily the whole concept of theosophy in that way,
but consciousness,
but consciousness as a whole,
important.
Of course, is
key. It's everything.
It's just what Brian Cox said. he's. I think I said the other week, where he said, if we're the only planet with life, then without us, the universe wouldn't matter. Now, isn't that an interesting idea? The word matter. He said wouldn't mean anything. What word do we use for meaning anything? We use the word matter. What's this? This is matter.
Yeah.
I find that idea that even in our language, does it matter that it matters? Does matter? I don't think the universe would exist without our consciousness.
No.
What we call the universe, and I don't think it is a universe. I don't think it is one set of rules for everything. I think that the left and the right hand side of the brain are completely distinct cognitive systems, and I think this is all stuff we're going to talk about hopefully in our channel. But whatever NASA is, it's about convincing you live in a material world, a material universe, and everything is far too far away for anyone to deal with except them.
Yeah.
And that to me is...
They are the gatekeepers.
They are the gatekeepers.
Your children, you know nothing. Just don't question us.
Exactly. And that's why they...
Eat what you're fed.
Exactly. And that's why that Virgin thing fell to bits. Oh, don't try and go to space, mate, because you're dead. Yeah. Even though, as far as we were concerned, it shouldn't be as hard as going that fast in the atmosphere.
No.
And that for me, it all just seems to fit together in a very negative way, which is very sad.
So I think it's safe to say that I think Richard's got a really, really strong case with this one, personally. I don't know about Simon, but that's my opinion.
I think a lot of his photographic stuff is pretty rubbish, to be honest. But when you take it all together and you look at it with the moon landing stuff that we looked into, it seems to fit. With the whole Kennedy thing, it all seems to fit together in terms of the human behaviour. You can see where they sent the scientists, where they took people, where they took the public, and you can see how they've used it time and time again to take people's concentration, particularly with Apollo, off of things like Vietnam. Everyone's children were being sent to somewhere, like no, 19. The Americans, they're celebrating how young the people were being killed in a song. I mean, what kind of logic is that? They should be ashamed of that. I mean, and time and time again, there seems to be something abusive.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what else to say.
Well, please please subscribe, and please give us your opinion and put some comments down there. We want to know your thoughts and bounce some ideas. We have many fantastic shows covering and reviewing some of Richard's videos because he has an absolute library full of stuff, and we look forward to seeing you next time.